And that completes my joy because this is my whole mission. And besides that, back to verse 27, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it's given to him from heaven. In other words, all of my notoriety, all the followers that I have, all the fame that I have, that's all a loan from heaven to me. They're all heavens to begin with. It's just like everything else, and a person cannot receive one thing, cannot receive one person, let alone a mob, unless it's given to him from heaven. And you wonder why people who used to come to me are turning away from me and going to Christ? Because my whole purpose is to point to him. God sent John for this. This was God's plan. Gather a people together and lift them up. Give them then, after you've gathered them, to Jesus. This is your purpose, John. Rise like a star in the wilderness and then burn out like a meteorite. That's the plan. And John knows that's the plan. This is what he was blessed to do. Jesus is the real blessing. So if I'm pointing to Jesus, I'm blessing others. Now the bridegroom is here, and it's his voice that the bride wants. And while John prepared the bride for the ceremony, he prepared her for the groom. And as it happens, as that unification occurs, his joy increases because he sees the happiness of the bride for her bridegroom. He sees the love of the bridegroom for his bride. And now that they're together, he says, I can take a step back. I should not be a focal point. You know, wouldn't a consumer mentality say, you know, if you're saying, what's in it for me, be totally out of context in a wedding ceremony? Can you imagine your best friend comes to you and says, hey, I'd like you to stand with me in the wedding, and you go, what's in it for me? Imagine all of these bridesmaids, and the bride comes to him and says, hey, I want you to stand with me at the wedding, and they go, well, are you going to pay for my dress? I mean, maybe you do say that, but hopefully it's tactful. God says to Abram, God says to John, he says, look, you get the benefit of just being able to participate in all of this. He says to Abraham, I'm going to let you participate in the blessing that I'm going to do for the whole world. I'm sending you out to be a blessing, and you'll have to lose stuff. That's going to happen, right? If I'm leaving the place of my fathers, I'm going to lose stuff, but I'm going to bless you. And so this is why Abram leaves his home country. This is also the reason why he's willing to take Isaac up a hill when God says, I want you to sacrifice to me. Just you and Isaac are going to go up to the top of this hill, the two of you alone. Bring some wood, you're going to need it. And he's willing to go to offer a sacrifice to God because Abram knows, and this is what we get from the context in Hebrews, he knows that nothing I have is mine. Like a person cannot receive even one thing unless it's given to him from heaven. And so Abram realizes that even if Isaac isn't the final option for you, he knows that God must have a plan B of some sort. Maybe it's to show his power by resurrecting Isaac. That's in Hebrews. So often we get into this, it's not fair mentality. We started off with, well, what's in it for me? And then we get down the road a ways and something bad happens in our life and we say, it's not fair. Can you imagine if Abraham had said to God, it's not fair, not going. It's not fair that I lost my job. It's not fair that God would take that person I love so much. It's not fair that I would get sick and have hardship in my life. And Abraham never says it's not fair. Never. Instead, he says, God bless me. And if he blessed me simply to take Isaac, fine. That's what I'm here for, to glorify God. Everything I have, including my son, came to me from heaven. It's all his. I must decrease and he must increase. So God says, if you know me, you become a man or a woman on mission. And if you have become a man or a woman on mission, which means you've been obedient to me, you will bless others. But that's not going to happen unless you're willing to lose. If you're willing to lose, I will come down into your lives. I will. Unless a man be willing to die to himself, he has no part in me, says Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why many of us have never felt his reality, because we're not willing to die to ourselves. We're not willing to get out of our comfort zone. We're not willing to leave the status and position and place that we've been. We're not willing to decrease. We think that whatever position we gained, we should maintain our whole life. But you can't be a blessing to others unless you're willing to lose. You can't. Unless you're willing to go out into the land, from the land of your father, to leave behind the security of what has been in your life, well, then you can't be a blessing. That doesn't mean that you will either lose all of those things. Oh, well, if that's what it takes, forget it. Why would I follow God? Yeah, I can imagine that could be a response that could come from us. Because if you've not met God in a very real, very personal way, in a very intimate, life-changing way in your life, why would you change? Why would you move from what's in it for me to how can I serve him? But when there is that grand moment where God becomes real in your life, that's when everything changes for you. And the only way you get to that point is to recognize that what you're working for, when you're on mission, has so much more value than whatever it is that you left behind. You must meet him personally and intimately in that journey. And when you see him for who he is, when you experience him deeply and fully, that's when you recognize that he is that treasure that you would sell everything for, that pearl of great price. He is the blessing. So when people are willing to go to the mat, God says, I will bless you. When people are willing to get on to mission, when people are willing to put their lives on the line and put their time on the line and put their money on the line, God says, I have blessed you for this, so that I might increase. And he calls you out of your homeland, not necessarily your physical one. He may never ask you to move. But he calls you into territory, each and every one of us, that feels risky and not safe. And if you're recognizing that mission in your life, the only correct response is that, bring it on. I don't care. I have what I need. I have a living Savior. I have a loving Father. I have a holy and exalted God. It doesn't matter. He must increase and I must decrease. We all ought to be attempting great things for him with our lives. It's as simple as that, really. Well, I don't know if I'm a main character type. Well, the only way you're going to know is to step out into it. Doesn't necessarily mean that things will be great for you by the world's standards. That's not what he's promising. But he does promise that things will be great for you by his standards. If we truly desire him, he will give us great gulps of himself. He'll give us huge portions of himself. That's the promise that he gives us in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 13. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your hearts. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. Now that's given to the Israelites as they are being sent off into captivity. God's promise to them is, look, if you'll seek me, then you'll find me. You will. And I believe that promise holds true across all generations and all people groups, because it is through the Israelites, through Abraham's offspring, that all are blessed. And so when you meet him and know him, then you'll be blessed. And that blessing will also be to go, to be sent, to be put on mission, because there can be no greater blessing than to see others come to know that blessing. So this is my prayer for us as a church. That we would be a people who know God, that we sort of take on instability in our lives. at least an instability based on world values. May we be blessed with a stability that allows us to go into all sorts of challenges, to weather all sorts of storms, because that stability is God's stability. The wise man built his house upon rock. May we build wisely. May we build our house upon the rock. May we decrease as he increases.